Hi, I'm Roy Collin, the host of the podcast. You can find everything about me by scanning the QR code there or going to roycollin.com, and you'll find my 6 podcasts: the Podfather, helping people become podcasters; the Awakening, exposing fraud and corruption but with solutions; the Crypto, all things blockchain technology; meditation podcast; speaking podcast; and the Learn Polish podcast. You can also help the show by actually making a donation, visiting the store, or helping my sponsors. I hope you enjoyed this week's show.
Today we are thrilled to feature Dr. Reza John Vedadi, a distinguished scholar and expert on West Asian identity and cultural dynamics. With a rich background in Middle Eastern studies, Dr. Vedadi explores the intricate relationships between identity, culture, and the influence of the U.S. and the broader collective West on the region. So his insights promise to deepen our understanding of how these interactions shape contemporary narratives and identities in West Asia. And I also always want to welcome my forever co-host, Roy Collin of Awakening Podcast. And if it's meant to be, our 2 special guest hosts will be joining us. So stay tuned, okay? And furthermore, on Dr. Vedadi, let me share that he has spent the past 12 years directing, producing, and filming over 50 documentaries on West Asian and Muslim identity and culture. He began his academic journey with a degree in media studies from London Guildhall University. I hope I said it right. Followed by master's degrees in film production at London Metropolitan University and Islamic studies at Middlesex University. So in 2023, he earned a PhD from Loughborough University London and specialising in communication, politics, and culture. So welcome, Dr. Reza John Vedadi.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
And nowadays, we have so many information, both online and offline, and media. When it comes to media, it's even very difficult to discern which one is true, which one is correct, or how do we do it? Because anyone could just do craziest media production ever. And with the most critical conversations, I'm sure, Dr. Reza, you never run out of materials, right?
No, there's lots of things to talk about, especially when it's related to communication, media, culture.
And that's why I said high time that we have someone who's an expert in this matter and still understand what's going on in West Asia. So officially, to start our conversation, how about you help us define the concept of identity in West Asia, and in what ways do you see it being influenced or challenged by Western culture and media? So it's kind of like a broad topic, but you could kind of break it down for us, because as you are aware, because of the mainstream media controlling the narrative, so most of us or most people don't truly understand, the West Asian identity. So I'll take it over to you, and Roy and I will just continue the conversation with you.
So I think it's very important to begin with, right from the outset, to understand what we mean by identity, because that's something that I've been studying for almost 2 decades through my documentary filmmaking, my PhD. And each and every one of us have things that we associate with our identity, be it our nationality, our culture, our religion, our faith, things we values that we hold. And so if you look at, I'm glad that you used West Asian, because same people who think Orientalist or who have a specific kind of mindset will view that part of the world as the Middle East. The term Middle East was invented in the British India office, so the office that was controlling India for the British Empire in 1851, 1852, something like this. And so they decided to call the area, which is what we're calling from roundabout Egypt, that kind of area, up to Iran and Pakistan or Afghanistan, the Middle East. So between Britain, the center of place of colonization, and the colonized, which is India, so the Middle East. So for us to look at our identity and other identities, we have to kind of step back and decolonize our mind. Now, this is a term that's become very fashionable right now. Some people misuse it, some people abuse it, and some people don't understand it. And I think it's, a way of the left always trying to, attack and so forth. But however, what we mean by decolonizing the language specifically here right now is using terms that are not promoting colonial mindset. So I don't want to use the term Middle East because it makes me think through the prism of the British Empire. And I want to step back so I can have a more accurate picture of identity that we're discussing of this region. So I refer to what it is. It's the west of Asia. It's not the west of Europe. It's not the west of Africa. It's the west of Asia. It's not the middle of anything. If we say it's the middle of something, that means there has to be a beginning at the end, and that's in the middle. It's an area for itself, and the way we describe it, it's the region in West Asia. So that's the first thing I wanted to understand, is we go into this discussion understanding what decolonial language and decolonial mindset means. And a person who most of you will, I'm sure the host will know, but a lot of the guests will also know who he is Edward Said. And he discussed the concepts of Orientalism. So Orient is the East and Occident is the West. And this is how Europe, or mainly Western Europe, would see, France, Germany, Britain, the powers in the last 300-400 years or even Spain would see the Orient. And the Orient started from West Asia, the tip of West Asia, which would be Mediterranean, which is Palestine and Lebanon, and all the way to China and even Japan. And then that would be, they would refer to it as Far East and so forth, but the Orient would be that. So our discussion today will revolve around how the Europeans see the Orient, the East, and how the Orient see themselves, how the East see themselves, how people from Iran and from Iraq and Palestine and these countries see themselves. And does that match how the Western perception, be it through education, be it through novels, be it through communication means like TV and radio and cinema, which is a very powerful tool, and a very powerful tool, the foreign policy, the politics, and also internal politics of a country, for example, UK or United States or Canada or Europe in general, how they see these identities. And that's the discussion that I would love to have with you guys in the audience, is to dissect how me also living in the West how the East has been packaged for us and presented to us, and how the East sees itself. And is there a common ground between that, or do we need to have a shift in our mindset and decolonize? Because there is still the process of colonization. And I say this when I enter conferences. The first thing I say is, please don't forget that colonization hasn't ended. The process of colonization continues, and it's continuing right now in the most fiercest and most horrid and evil ways, which is in Palestine right now. A group of people have occupied that land, have taken it, and so they are using the process of colonization. So these are the discussions I would love to have, and how my identity as a person from the East living in Europe or in the West, I identify myself, and how that process has changed. This may resonate with other people. This may also the idea of people who are in the East, how they believe injustice has been done to them by the way that communication in media and politics is representing them, which then causes knock-on effects, such as foreign policies that result in bombing of countries and destroying of societies and killing children and women and men and innocent people because of things that become that package of Oriental view of the East specifically. So that's the direction that I was hoping to have.
Oh, perfect. That's exactly how we want this conversation to be. Like, in fact, it's just not too, like maybe just within the period of the last 3 months that I've learned to understand, the difference between using the Middle East term and the West Asia, and knowing that my being always like want to immerse that right word, or I want to correct my language as well, or else my my understanding will remain distorted. And yes, and that's why we had this conversation and this platform, because we wanted to really like find a way that us, the host, also with our audience can continue to unlearn the things that doesn't help us anymore and learn new things that help us. So yeah, and thank you. And yes, understanding also of how, like, one of the things that irks me most is when I first moved to United States is when other people who've never been to my country started talking about how we are in my country. So it's like oh, forget it, it's like, especially in relation to the collective West. So, and because even if I was new in the United States, I had my own learning, true learning, underground learning in the Philippines as well for what is the true world history. So yeah, so do carry on with how you can help us more, deep dive for this understanding. I just wanted to mention that at the 2024 BRICS Summit, the Iran president also addressed the issue of U.S. sanctions, and he really called for he took that opportunity to ask, members of the BRICS and those who attended that we should be able to ensure respect for the Palestinian rights. And I'm glad to do that. I'm glad to being able to read that from Sputnik Africa, because one of our favorite guests, also immersed in Syria and an independent journalist. For her, she said there's no much more important conversation, but it's about the Palestinian rights. But I do understand that we have to talk about other things, especially BRICS Summit has just been concluded. So feel free to, lead us from here. And Roy, feel free to chime in whenever.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I've learned from that because I always known it as the Middle East, so that's something good for me to learn. What I would love to know is, I have seen pictures of Iran in the 70s where it kind of looked like Europe. And how was that for you, seeing that it was changed? Because, I mean, if I look at a lot of the stuff that America's done, John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where they went into a load of countries and they changed the leaders and they changed, like, is that something that you have seen and you'd like to see it revert back to the way that it was?
So the relationship is a very good question. The relationship between the US and Iran go back approximately 100 so years. At the time, so the British and the British Empire had been interfering in that part of the world, as many parts of the world, for a few centuries, right? And Iranians had become untrustworthy of the Europeans, specifically the British. And so they went towards the direction of the Americans to bring them in to modernize the country. So we're talking about just after 1906, where there was a constitutional reform, where a constitution was being a written constitution being introduced to the running of the country. Still had a monarch, and it was at that time they were called the Qajar. That was the dynasty before the Pahlavi dynasty that came after was in the 20s. And so Iran was transforming slowly into what we call a modern state, specific borders, specific rules of the country, like constitution and stuff like that. It always had for many years in one of the most ancient countries in the world, institutions like universities and judiciary and everything, but it was transforming into a more modern state with railroads and stuff like that. And so it wasn't really happening really well because unfortunately we didn't have very good monarchs, and so people weren't engaged. The constitution was supposed to enable the people to engage with the running of the country. So you would have a parliament and you would elect the parliament, just like in Britain where we have an elected king, but the people choose a prime minister and have more of a say in the running of the country than just a monarch running everything, and you're basically a subject to the monarch. You're more of a citizen in that sense. And this continued until about 1953, where at that time it was Mohammad Reza Shah, the last king of Iran. And we had a elected prime minister, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh. And he realized one of the ways for Iran to modernize and become more successful and powerful is if the oil that belongs to Iran isn't being managed by the British. At that time, it was the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, and the oil isn't being taken, and only a small percentage of the profit is given to Iran, as opposed to Iranians manage the oil, Iranians sell it, and Iranians benefit, like America, like any other country which benefits from its natural resources. And so he, through the parliament and everything, through law, he nationalized the Iranian oil, as opposed to being a British company that is running it and benefiting from it, and only providing a small percentage to the Iranians where it was being taken from. And so then the British and the Americans got together and conducted a coup d'etat. They spent money and they managed to start riots in the street, fighting between groups and stabbings and so forth. And the Shah at that time had fled. He got scared. He had fled when the riot started, and the Americans and the British told him, no, you can go back now. He returned back to Iran. And he returned, and Mohammad Mossadegh, the prime minister, the democratically elected prime minister, was put on trial for treason and some other charges and got convicted. So after that, we didn't have any democratic process in the country until the 1979 revolution. So between 1953 and 1979, the Shah was ruling as an authoritarian king. He would elect the prime minister, and the parliament was subservient to him. And it was a facade of anything, well, not really a facade, really, not really a democratic process. And so people realized that their lives are not getting better. A small number of people were becoming richer through the connections and the connection to the king and his circles and courtiers and stuff. But majority of the people, and if you look at the pictures, so the pictures you're talking about are the pictures that Western Orientalists would take of Iran. There's pictures of Iran where you would go to Tehran, the capital, and it would be from the middle of what is now Tehran, which is the center, the Azadi area, all the way to the south were shanty towns. People living in literal shanty-made houses. And there was no running water, no running electricity. So they would be washing their clothes in the street. And this was the Iran that everybody's talking about. Oh, the 70s, people were in, mini skirts, and they had, freedoms to wear whatever they want, but they didn't have freedoms to say whatever they want. They didn't have the freedoms for elections. There was no free expression criticizing the king or the government or anything like that. So what freedoms are talking about? What you can wear or actual real freedom? And there was a secret service, the Savak, who was trained by the Mossad, by the Israeli Secret Service, on tactics on how to prevent people who are unhappy with the situation, protesting or anything like that. There were spies everywhere in Iran, keeping an eye out for the Savak to make sure that the king maintains his power. So his power is being maintained not by the will and the support of the people, but by brutality, and this is the majority. Obviously, a small minority were benefiting. Western countries, such as UK and specifically America, which had become very close to Iran, was benefiting because the Shah was making a lot of money. He went from a revenue of $400 to $500 million a year to $15 billion in the space of 4 years, revenue from oil. This is back when, in the 70s. So $15 billion was a lot of money back then. He was going crazy. He was buying weapons from the US. He was buying, all of these things. He was importing. Companies would come to Iran, engineering companies and other companies, and they would, these American companies and European companies, they would charge the Iranians more than. So, for example, I remember speaking to people who were like, "Oh, my father used to work in Iran. We used to love it." I said, "Oh, so how was it?" He goes, "Yeah, we were there. We had such a lovely life. We had a driver, nice school, everything, and it was so good because." He's telling Iranian now, right? He goes, it's amazing because if something cost $1 for us to do in Europe or America, we'll be charging him like $10, the Iranian. So we were making a killing out of it. I was like, okay, so the fact that the Iranians kicked you out, there's a reason why they kicked you out. And you're proving that to me, right? That there was abuse of the money that was generated that was supposed to be for the people. There wasn't that many women in education at that time. We didn't have that many universities. This is before the revolution. Villages didn't have electricity or running water or gas. So there was a lot of things that were like, where is this money going to? That's good that you're buying F-14s and tanks, Chieftain tanks from the UK and God knows what else. But you need to invest it in the people that this money is being taken away from. The oil belongs to the Iranian people. The Shah of Iran isn't the owner of Iran. You're supposed to be serving the people. But that's not the mindset that the Shah had. He thought, he's a ruler, he knows best. And Americans and even Jimmy Carter, the president of America, I think a few months before the revolution, they were together. It was Christmas, and I think he was in America. The Shah was in America, and they do a toast, and it's famous. You can look it up on YouTube, where he says that Iran is an island of stability in a region that is full of conflicts. And what happens a few months later? A revolution happens. The Shah flees again. And now, what kind of a Shah are you? If this is your land, why are you running away? Stay back, and if they take you to court, defend what you've done, unless you feel guilty about the fact that you've done something wrong. So he flees. Imam Khomeini comes back after being in exile for a number of years, and then a referendum is put to the people in 1979. Do you want to have a Islamic republic? And then 98% vote yes. So this was the referendum in 1979. And so the government is, slowly there's governments forming. The people are trying to decide. The communists were part of the revolution. Nationalists were part of the revolution. Secularists were part of the revolution. Islamists were part of the revolution. So a whole host of people revolted against the Shah. It wasn't an Islamic-only group. It was really everyone, students, everyone who had enough. And so this happened, and then I think it was 1979 in November, around about then, when America was still interfering in Iran. And Imam Khomeini had realized that America will never let Iran go because it's a country that has a huge amount of resources. It was acting as the policeman for America in that region. So it was the boss of that region who answered to the bigger boss, who was America. And so America is like, okay, we'll have to find another way to do a counter-revolution to get rid of, this to get rid of this kind of Islamic republic, this referendum that's happened, and bring back the Shah or another Shah, his son or whatever. They keep doing this in 1945, after the Second World War, or during the end of the Second World War. The British came, took Mohammad Reza Shah's father, Reza Pahlavi, took him, put him onto a ship and sent him to South Africa. They said, because you had sympathies towards Germany, you're going to have to go. Sorry, I apologize, 1941. You're going to have to go. And so then they occupied the south of Iran, and the Russians occupied, the Soviets occupied the north of Iran. And they brought Mohammad Reza and put him. He was 18. He had no clue about running the country. He just, he would go to the boarding school in Switzerland, and he learned French and English, and, that's not how you learn to run a country. To the point where in 1945, when there was a major meeting between Churchill, President Roosevelt, and Stalin, and it's a famous picture of it, they're sitting together, that's in Iran, in Tehran. And when they conducted that famous negotiation of let's, separate half of Europe for the Soviets and half of it for the Western Europe and American sphere, the Shah wasn't even advised. They just came into the country, did what they want. He wasn't even invited to even come and take a picture with. This is how they thought of Iranians. This is how the West thought of the Orient, of Iran. And so when Imam Khomeini came back, he said, the era of humiliation is over now. There is not going to be no more of us allowing people to come into our country and using and abusing. And he does a 60-minute, the famous 60-minute TV show from America. He does a interview with the gentleman from 60 Minutes, and they said, what do you want to do with all these contracts and agreements and so forth that you have with America? He said, we will review every contract. Anything that's in our benefit, in the interest of Iran, we'll maintain it. Anything that's not in the interest of Iran, we will get rid of it. That contract will be ended. A lot of people try to paint the Islamic Revolution, and specifically Imam Khomeini, as a zealot, religious, fundamentalist, backward-looking person. But when you look into the actual history of Iran and the things that he said, he actually wanted to propel Iran into a mindset of a successful, progressive society. He had Islamic values. Yeah, Islamic values date back to the Prophet from 1,300, 400 years ago. But those principles can be applied, in his belief, to modern era. And the main core principles were justice and the prevention of oppression. And that's why Iran, since the revolution, so since 1979, against all the pressures of the US and Europe, has been supporting the Palestinian struggle. As soon as the revolution happened, they cut relations with two states. The first one they cut it with was Israel. The second one was South Africa. South Africa, if you remember, at that time was going through the process of apartheid. There was oppression against the native black people, right? And so Iran said, we cannot have a relation with a country that implements apartheid. So they cut relations, and they supported the ANC and other movements that were trying to bring democracy and remove apartheid from West Africa. To the point where in 1994, I believe, when Nelson Mandela goes to visit, that time it was Ayatollah Khamenei who became the leader of the revolution, because Imam Khomeini had passed away in 1989. He goes up to him, and this is in YouTube, you can put it. If you put Nelson Mandela, my leader, the video will come up. And he's approaching Ayatollah Khamenei, and he's got his arms out, and he goes, my leader. So the word Rahbar is what, we call the leader of the revolution, Rahbar. Rahbar means leader. So this goes to show that Nelson Mandela appreciated the support that Iran had given the movement for democracy. And this is, I believe, what will happen in the future of whoever becomes the president of a unified Palestine, where the Jews and Christians and Muslims can all live together under one human rights, under one law, under one equal application of the law. The leader of that country will come to Iran and say, my leader. Why? Not because Iran is anything special, but because ever since the revolution, they said to America, you can have relations with us. And still now, Iran has always said, we don't mind having relations with America or anyone except Israel, because as long as you treat us as equal, not as a subordinate, not as a slave to whatever it is you want to implement, be it arms sales. And if you remember a couple of years ago when Donald Trump was still in power, he referred to Saudi Arabia as a cash cow. He literally said this in front of the camera. These are things that people, we joke about between us, but a president of a country calling another country that they're selling $100 billion worth of weapons to, clearly describes that country as a cash cow. One of the problems they have with him is because he shows the ugly face of hegemonic US foreign policy without trying to cover it up in some kind of liberal, nice human rights facade. He shows it as it is, and that's what they don't like. Even though right now it's very clear that the American foreign policy, especially towards West Asia and specifically Palestine and these countries, is completely devoid of any human rights. There's no doubt that the genocide that's taking place right now in Palestine could not have happened without the military, financial, and political support of the US. And many scholars argue that it's not Israel that's committing the genocide alone. It's America using Israel to commit the genocide. A lot of people say, oh, Israel controls America. A lot of people have that argument because of the lobby and all of this messaging that's been given out. But we have other scholars, and specifically Ayatollah Khamenei and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed, martyred a few weeks ago. He said it's not Israel that controls America. It's America that uses Israel to do its bidding in this part of the world. And this may have not happened as much if the Shah or whoever his descendant would have been in power, because they would have used Iran as the police or the policeman of the area. So to wrap it up, basically that relationship with America started off a place where they started abusing their relationship with Iran, taking advantage of it, setting democracy back decades because of the actions that they conducted in 1943. And so when the Islamic Revolution happened, Imam Khomeini knew the history and prevent them trying to interfere with Iran directly from within, all of the things that have happened, and then this kind of strained relationship to the point where there is no kind of direct relationship anymore. It's all indirect, and they hate us and we hate them, and they did this to us and we did that to them. So there's all of that goes on now between Iran and America.
When you saw Benjamin Netanyahu in Congress and getting a standing ovation, I mean, those of us that are seeing all the bombings and the atrocities that are going on, that's disgusting. It's basically them supporting that in public, which they're representing every single person. So it was a sad state of affairs, and I just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, imagine the mindset you have to have, and I know all the images that you talk about because I still see them, and I have, children, and sometimes my wife, I see her crying, and I don't even ask her why. I know as soon as she starts crying, I know what's happened. I know what she's seen. And especially recently, when it was only was it a week ago, when we saw the live images of the burning young man and a few people in the tent, and every day we think, okay, it can't get any worse, and we see something worse. It's like as if we live in a horror movie, and the director is thinking, what else can I do to shock the audience? And the audience think, okay, this is it. It can't get any worse than that, and it happens. And so for us, we realize that, right? What is it that these congressmen and these senators and these American politicians, what mindset do they have that they know about these images? And I'm sure they must have seen some. They can avoid as many as they want, but there's no way you could have missed every single thing that's happening, because it's been happening for a year, and it's happening to such an extent that they still stand up and cheer for him and feel like he deserves that cheer, he deserves that support. Now, clearly, we know that it's been proven with Professor John Mearsheimer and other scholars that, and even themselves, we have AIPAC that says, we're going to spend 100 million to support candidates that support our goals. So we know that there's a Zionist lobby that supports politicians in America. But I believe it has to be more than that. Can't be just like, I want to get into power, so I will support that. There must be an understanding within the mind frame of these people that want to get into power through the support of the Zionists, that they believe people from the Orient, people from Palestine, are lesser people. They're not as human. They're not deserving as the same empathy and compassion as, say, someone from Ukraine deserves, or someone from another part of Europe or America deserves. And sometimes I feel, is it that, or is it that they are so evil that even the suffering that happens in the recent hurricane, New Orleans and Florida and other hurricanes that have been taking place, they don't send aid to their own people. They don't support even their own people. So is it just they're against foreign people from the East, Arabs? I think that they've gone even past that level of humanity, where they don't even care about their own U.S. citizens who are white. What are they, just American? They're from America and they've been there for generations. They don't even care about them. It's gone from that. It's gone from the stage of being racist and Islamophobic or whatever to the point where it's just become people of pure evil. Yeah, I'm sure there's some in them who genuinely care. And I've seen politicians and congressmen who have supported Palestine and who have supported various, who have spoken up against various interventions of the U.S. in foreign policies that is causing conflicts around the world. But they're very far and few in between. They'd probably be able to count them on two hands, if that. It's majority, most of it, it's become people who are happy to support evil in its most evil capitalistic, most evil imperialistic, most evil hegemonistic set application to the world. That as long as I am in power, filling my pockets, I literally don't care about even American citizens. Forget about people from Palestine or Iran. I don't even care about people from another state right now, as long as I'm okay. So for me, I think humanity is waking up. What's happening in Palestine, the blood of the Palestinians has, unfortunately, it's been that many children and women and innocent people had to be killed for people around the world, and I include myself in that, to truly wake up, to realize the world isn't what it's been presented to us. The world isn't how the Western governments and their parliaments and the facade of democracy and human rights. All of this is not being is not real. It's like a facade. It's a fake story. It's a Hollywood film that we're participating. But now, or the Matrix. If you remember the Matrix, I need to wake up. And unfortunately, the blood of these martyrs from Palestine will wake us up not only to the oppression of Palestinians, but to oppression all around the world, and to the mismanagement and the corruption of each of our governments, of why are they supporting companies, corporations within our own country against the benefit of citizens. In the UK, we have privatization of our water, Thames Water. The company that's taken over and is managing water services, they got fined a lot of money because they were pumping sewage into the sea and the rivers. So oppression is not just happening in Palestine. That's the extreme of oppression. But that government that allows that oppression in Palestine is happy to allow a smaller version of that oppression and corruption in its own country, be it the US or the German or UK. So I think the blood of the Palestinians has woken us up to what's happening in Palestine and other countries, and has made us realize, wait, if our governments are happy with that, what else are they tricking us with, and what else are they doing that is not good for us, and what other corruption that is happening behind the scenes that we're just too busy, because we're so busy trying to pay the bills and pay the mortgage and the rent, that we don't even have time to step back and say, let me have a look at what my government is actually doing, what these people that I've elected or ruling over me, what are they actually doing? What laws are they passing? Within our society, we have people who are needy. How is my government, who is in the top 10 economy in the world, supporting these people instead of cutting the support that is giving to them? How is it supporting him? So these are things that I think that what's happened in that part of the world will impact people and hopefully wake them up.
And when I look at when I look at everything, UK, Ireland, all over the world, and we look at the homelessness and everything is created by the councils, which is run by the government, and they kick people out, and they basically, like, they double the electricity bills, yet give the guy running it something like 4 million, like the profits for British Gas and everything. The whole lot is just a farce. And just like when we look at the media, because most people are looking at this, say even Muslims or whatever, because the corruption that's done with the media that has just made you look so bad, and unfortunately people fall for it, and then there's hatred within because they have told me this, and they don't have critical thinking. Unfortunately, most people, they see something on CNN and they take it for truth. And the same thing with, unfortunately, AI. I mean, I've seen AI is actually spewing out so much lies, and people are doing a search on that. They take it for granted that it's true, and they base their decision on that. And with you creating films, documentary, to see that, it must be disgusting for you to realize this is it's going on for hundreds of years, but the way that they've been doing it for the last 100, it's totally planned and orchestrated.
Did you want to add something, Grace?
No, that's just so true, and if everything that you shared, and as well as Roy, that if it's just so sad that it has to be people have to be burnt alive, and blood should be really shed in order for us to wake up. However, let's just consider that it's a good thing that we're waking up, okay? And so in when you mentioned about the what Saudi Arabia and the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but I'm hopeful that it's getting resolved, because as far as I know, I think since last year, both countries are beginning to restore diplomatic relations, and I think China has a good role to play in that. And isn't it that both countries Iran is officially a member of BRICS already, and Saudi Arabia is, interested in that too. So do you see hope that, all the other, especially Iran is for me, the same level of how collective West really demonized the reputation, or everything about Iran is just like the Russophobia, the Chinophobia, Iranophobia, whatever you call it. So there must be something truly, truly powerful in Iran, in these countries. But do you find it hopeful in what's happening between Iran and Saudi Arabia?
So I'm going to answer Roy's question first, and then I'll come to Saudi and Iran. So I agree with Roy that the media, specifically legacy media, mainstream media, has become not a critique of power, so that power is answerable to the people. It's become a mouthpiece for power. So all the major news outlets, Sky and Reuters and Fox and CNN and even the BBC, if you look how they have presented the Palestinian, the war on Palestine right now, the genocide, you can't mention the word genocide without them quickly acting as lawyers in defense of the Israeli government, Israeli regime. This is all true for all of them, right? So we see that, and when they describe Palestinians being killed by Israelis, it's always like Palestinians died, and then like, who killed them? How did they die? Why did they die? It's never like they were killed by Israelis in the headlines and stuff like that. So we now know, clear evidence has been, and research is done, that proves that the Western legacy media is the mouthpiece for their governments. For example, none of them question Israel the way we're having discussion right now, or many other alternative media. None of them question or discuss Russia in a critical, open way. None of them discuss China in a critical way. It's always through the lens of the Orientalist foreign policy of the UK or the US, or if it's France 24, France or whatever. They kind of have the same worldview. And so how do we counter that? Because they're not going to change. They're going to continue being the mouthpiece. So I believe in the idea of media resistance. And this is the idea that's is kind of growing, where alternative media such as yours, such as other channels, are discussing the alternative view than what the mainstream media does, and allowing the audiences to have access to that information, and then for them to be able to decide what it is, as you said, critically decide what it is they want to believe. And so I think it's also important that whoever's listening to this, because some people are like, okay, but how do I apply critical thinking? How do I apply that to my understanding specifically of the news? I always say, okay, fine, you want to listen to the BBC, fine, listen to BBC, but also listen to the news from the other side as well. I'm not saying all news is unbiased, even the other side, whatever the other side is, maybe Iranian news or maybe Russian news or Chinese news, they're going to have the bias of their view of the world, but also read that. And so try to find the truth in the middle. And also when they describe someone or a group of people, Palestinians, and you're seeing a negative description of a group of people, think for yourself, why are they describing one group in a positive way and another group in a negative way? So be constantly alert to questioning what it is you're reading. Even if it's Iranian or Russian media, read that and be critical of that. Don't take it on as you both said, don't take it on and say, because it says it in the news is fact. News doesn't give you facts. News gives you opinion of group of people, editors that sit answerable to their bosses, whoever that be, the corporate owner of the corporate company CNN, who then is in the same parties and groups as, the politicians that rule the country. So, that's regarding the concept of media resistance, right? You guys are doing well. Others like you need to continue the resistance of mainstream and have the alternative discussions, writing articles, and there's new websites like Substack and many other websites where people can, openly now directly speak to their audience. And so that's one of the empowering things about internet. Unfortunately, we have social media platforms like YouTube and maybe Instagram and Facebook and others which are controlled, so you can't say specific things, either they block you or they close your account or they demonetize you. However, there are other places where you can go, and I don't think we should worry about, if I go to another platform, I won't get as many views, so I will water down my views to get more views. Like, no, stick to your principles. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. If you're talking about the truth, and you're talking truth to power, whatever it is you're doing, you don't need to necessarily be, if you've been removed from a big platform, that's fine, go to an alternative platform, continue what you're doing. Because you never know, it could be someone who has influence, sees your video, reads your article, and that person goes and impacts, and I've seen this, goes and impacts hundreds of thousands of other people. So this is my advice to the viewers. If you're thinking of, being active in media resistance, Don't worry about the quantity of numbers of people viewerships. Go and work on the quality of what you're doing. So that's the first thing. Regarding Saudi Arabia and Iran, Saudi Arabia and Iran are both Muslim countries. One is a predominantly Sunni sect of Islam, and other the Shia sect of Islam. Iran, from its inception, when the revolution happened, wanted to have good relations, and specifically, like, keeps mentioning this, and you might have heard President Pezeshkian mention this during his visits to UN last month, to visits he had with, I think, President Putin last week, and this today he was in BRICS. All of the times he goes, we want to have friendly relations with everyone. He specifically said that. And so this is a true policy of Iran, where it does not want to fight wars. And how do we know that? In the last 200 years, Iran has not instigated any war on any country. The only war that it was involved in was when Iraq invaded into Iranian territory. I remember this because I don't remember it, but I was 2 years old. And my mother told me the story. I was 2 years old, and we lived on a border town. And this is the first border town. This is the first town area that got invaded by Saddam's army, 1980, September 22nd. And so my mother was hearing explosions, and she thought, is there construction outside? She came, she didn't see construction. And so my dad comes in the car, says to my mom, there's a war has started, get the kids into the car. She literally gets us into the car with our, PJs, closed the door, and she didn't return back to that place for a number of decades because the war started. So we had to leave the town. We had to go to the capital. And then it's because of that I ended up being in the UK, because Saddam was armed by the Soviets and the Western countries, and he was bombing Tehran to demoralize the population, like Second World War, to demoralize the population. So Iran gives up gives up fighting against it. And so that's one of the reasons why we moved to the UK, so that the bombs that are falling doesn't fall on our house and kills us. Back to the story of Iran, at the beginning has always wanted to have good relations with its neighbors. And so it only makes sense for Saudi Arabia to realize that Iran is a major power in the region now. And it has demonstrated itself through a number of means, not just because militarily it develops its own weapons and it can defend itself and project its power that we saw when it fired missiles towards Israel, but it's a country that is not going anywhere. Every year they were thinking there's going to be, regime change. For 30, 40 years, they're talking about regime change in Iran. Nothing's happening in Iran. People, there's discussions about, problems internally, but that's nothing to do with outside actors. Iranians have their own government, have their own system, and that's to do with them. How they want to reform it and change it, that's to do with them. And so Saudi Arabia, through negotiations, initially the negotiations, I think, happened through Oman and Iraq. And at the end, China came up and picked it up to kind of like seal the deal there. And if you remember, in 2020, Qasem Soleimani, who was martyred by Donald Trump's drone strike, he was carrying letters that discussed resolving between Iran and Saudi Arabia for them to have relations again when he arrived in Iraq, where he was killed. Because if Iran and Saudi have better relations, there's less need for Saudi to have full relations or any relation with Israel. Because what America does is use Israel as a counterweight to Iran. How does it do that? It says Iran is a danger. Iran wants to export its revolution to your country. It wants to, get rid of you. So come onto our side. Israel will protect you, and then you'll be safe from Iran. Iran's like, I have no plans for any of these countries. Yes, I'd love to have relations of business relations, economic relations. Who doesn't? But Iran you never find traces of Iran trying to invade any of these countries. Then someone says, well, what about Syria? Iran was involved in the Syrian conflict, in the Syrian civil war, where the rebels supported by Americans. Well, what happened in Syria is Syria was an ally of Iran for 50, 60 years, right? 50 years during since after the revolution. And it was only one of few number of Arab countries that supported Iran during the Iraq and Iran war in the 1980s. So Iran, as a loyal friend, was there. And the Syrian government said to Iran, we have rebels, we have Daesh, we have these al-Nusra, all of these people. They're trying to, attack, and we need your support. So Iran sent advisors. It didn't send, squadrons of thousands of troops like America does to many bases around the world. It sent advisors on how to prevent Daesh taking over your country. And do we genuinely think that we want Daesh instead of whatever disagreement we have with Bashar al-Assad and his government or whatever, and his system of ruling, do we genuinely think that Daesh is going to be a better replacement for that? So then Iran sent advisors and helped. That's the extent to which he has ever been involved in any other conflict. He's never sent troops to fight. It doesn't send thousands of troops and stuff like that. So Saudi Arabia is looking at the world now. They tried to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. They were not successful. They spent billions. They tried to get rid of the Ansarullah in Yemen, spent billions, killed 450,000 women and children. Another genocide there as well that the media doesn't cover. They were not successful. They realized, okay, we need to come in terms to Iran. Iran is our next door neighbor. Iran is not going anywhere. America, after a few years, may not be able to come to our aid because it's kind of economies staggering. The dollar is becoming weaker. Is it able to project itself around the world in the next 20, 30 years? And Iran is like, why are you scared of us? There's no reason for you to be scared of us. There's we're not going to invade you. We're not going to attack you. Come to think about it, if someone goes to invade or attack you, if you call us, we would probably come to your aid. So there's no reason for it. And so the people who run that country, Mohammed bin Salman, he was young when he kind of took power. He has become more mature and realized, okay, I need to be a little bit more smart, right? Things are not black and white. So they've decided to build fences. And I think it was today where they were discussing about having flights, direct flights and stuff set up between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So that's moving along. And BRICS helps, because if they all join a major organization like BRICS and they're cooperating together, then there's a less sense of danger between them, right? And so that's why Israel wants to, with any way possible, bring Iran into the conflict as it's destroying Palestine and Lebanon, because it knows it's going to lose soon. It can't continue. Its economy is crumbled. America is not going to keep pumping money and weapons because it's going to run out of that. People are going to get tired in America. And so it's trying to bring Iran into the fight, so then America gets involved. And so Saudi Arabia is trying to play this smart game of, as you said, are they in BRICS or are they not in BRICS? Because they didn't send the crown prince, they sent a foreign minister. And this was for the heads of state, right? You had President of China and the Prime Minister of India and the President of Iran and South Africa. And then you got Saudi Arabia sending in a foreign minister. That's a bit disrespectful towards BRICS, because Saudi is trying to see how things go with the West. Who comes into power? Is Donald Trump going to come into power? Is it going to be Harris? And so they want to try and play it smart. They're not playing it smart. They're not very smart. Unfortunately, they're not very smart. If they were smart, instead of spending something like 100 and 150 billion or expected $1 trillion on a long city called Neon, they would have invested that into their own country, build universities, build schools, build housing for the poor. They have poor in Saudi Arabia. I don't think they're all rich. I've seen them when I went to do my pilgrimage, my Hajj. They will build the infrastructure of your company so that you're not relying on defense from America to not only defend you from some enemy outside, but also from the people of inside. Because if the people have no way of expressing themselves, many Saudis want to show support for Palestine, but now you're not allowed to show any expression of support for Palestinians either through social media or in public in Saudi Arabia. Now, as a Muslim, that makes my mind boggle that a Muslim country or a leading Muslim country does not allow public support, even on social media, of its citizens, of other Muslims who are getting killed under genocide. That makes me realize how fragile the Saudi regime feels it is. That if this gust of Palestinian support comes in, Will it turn into something else and displace us? This is how much they're scared. So instead of allowing their own people to be able to express themselves, obviously within whatever bounds of law that exists, you don't want to go, crazy and cause slander or whatever, but allow their citizens to express themselves, to be able to participate in the governorship of their own people, because it's a complete dictatorship monarchy. There is no parliament. There's nothing. It's just a king. He has his princes, ministers, and everybody runs it like that. Even some countries have some kind of, even during the time of the Shah, there was some parliament, but here it's just, or a prime minister, it's just the king and the ministers. That's it. They run the country. They're all related. They're all cousins. They're all uncles and stuff. However, if you want to secure your country, your future of your country, and, enable the people to participate, grow it from within. Don't import weapons. Spend hundred billions of bringing weapons that they can't use. And you know how they can't use it? Because it was only 4 or 5 years ago where the Yemenis fired missiles and drones, and they knocked out Aramco refinery. Half of it was destroyed. So all of these weapons that they have are not useful. It doesn't help them with anything. A country like Yemen that is sanctioned and they don't have a lot of access to a lot of resources managed to bypass all your security. So the Saudi-Iran relation, Iran comes from a place of strength. But the thing that Saudi has which benefits Iran is the influence on many other Muslim countries. Saudi Arabia has influence on Egypt, has influence on Bahrain, on UAE, on Morocco, on all of these countries. So that's why you see after the warm relations between Iran and Saudi, Egypt was warming up to Iran. UAE was warming up to restarting relations. Bahrain recently, in the last week, the foreign minister was there a couple of days ago speaking with the king of Bahrain. Morocco, all of these countries, and they're like, okay, now that our boss, Saudi Arabia, has good relations with Iran, we can come in now, we can have relations with Iran.
If I may interject, what's making Saudi Arabia have that influence on those other countries? Is it because just
money.
The oil reserve?
Money. They would literally give billions to Egyptian. I mean, how does America have influence on Egypt? It gives it aid every year. It gives it money. Okay. Whoever you give money to, they couldn't buy Hassan Nasrallah and they couldn't buy the Palestinians. But a lot of these countries, unfortunately, they come into power through the participation of their citizens. They have weak power bases, and so they need money from outside to maintain their power and security. It's not local. It's not like if you look, nobody's giving money to Iran.
So it's bribery, basically. They're being bribed to.
They've been influenced. They can call it bribery. You can call it influencing. You can call it whatever you want. But it's clear that after Saudi's rapprochement with Iran, if you look at the news, you start seeing Egypt, UAE first, and then Egypt, Bahrain, Jordan, all of these other countries. Even though sometimes they'll say something still snide against Iran, however, they're starting to say, okay, let's have relations, let's open our embassies, let's enable trade, let's enable our relationship to become normal again. And that's really sad for me as an analyst who looks at it, or someone from that region. It really breaks my heart to see a group of people that can clearly work together if those in power genuinely want the best for their own people, as opposed to keep themselves into power and line their pockets. If they genuinely wanted to have the best for their people, they'd be like, look, what's the problem in this region? What's the denominating factor that's causing problems for every other country? Let's work on getting rid of that one. Instead of let's work on attacking Iran or containing Iran or pressuring Iran, because it's the one who's fighting the issue that is causing problems for all of us. Because Egypt signed an agreement recognizing the Israeli regime, the Zionist. Jordan has done that. UAE has done that. Bahrain has done that. Saudi Arabia, they say, was about to do that, and then the Palestinian uprising happened on the 7th of October. So then that put a stop to that. why are they trying to make? Why are they running to make? Because America said we will maintain your security if you work with Israel. So this is all it goes to: power. They want to maintain their power. America promises them their power if they cooperate with Israel. Iran is like, you don't need America. You do not need America. We will help you to protect yourself. We will help you to be independent. We're doing it. No one's supporting us. And look at us. We have all of these sanctions, and we're a country that's sending satellite to space. Yeah, we have some issues, but we've progressed a lot with all the problems and the sanctions that we have. You know, we build our own cars. We manufacture our own products. You don't need to rely for your existence on America or England or Europe. Try to be independent. When you're independent, you're more likely to go towards, you're more likely to fight against oppression as opposed to support it to maintain yourself.
And I think that's how the BRICS offering an alternative resolution or option for those who really wants to be empowered. Yeah, because as far as one of the principles that I know in BRICS, especially in the BRICS expansion, and it's interesting that there's a number of Arab countries who are, who have applied, I think so. But as you said, once Saudi Arabia, makes that decision, and I guess to be optimistic, we'd like to take that credit that at least they're interested. I think even if they sent that, not the king over there, okay? So there's still that good thing. So if these BRICS can be influential in at least how their mindset in terms of freeing themselves from economic disparity or just tapping into their own resources and then working around their neighboring nations, I think that's what BRICS is doing. That's why that expansion is really powerful. So you answered already. I had a follow-up question of how BRICS will be influential, perhaps in the conflict in the West Asia. But if you want to expand more on that, but it seems like for me, they are influential indirectly. And this one is usually a question of other people also, critical thinkers. If Saudi Arabia comes in or others who are also been on the ally of the West, of the collective West, how can BRICS protect that internal security of not going to the old order? Everyone wants a new world order to benefit everyone, but not the same hegemony. So do you think the BRICS leadership will have that way in order for all the others not to be infiltrated? Because we all know, Roy and I know, there's infiltration all over.
Yeah. You can add anything, Roy, before I answer that?
Well, actually, just as you were saying it, because I remember there was an Iranian friend and she was trying to send money over, and the Western banks and PayPal and all this, they stopped the money. And it's the same with Russia. The fact that they can control that is a sad state of affairs. So if the BRICS allows people to trade with each other without these external corrupt bankers or whatever you call them, because the fact is this, if you wanted to send money to your loved ones, you can't do it. Why is that? That should never happen.
It's funny you say that. I had a friend who asked that is there any way we can support some orphans in Iran? And if I wanted it through a UK bank, the answer would be no. So I can't even send money for orphans. So it's not like you can put humanitarian money. It's just no trade. And so this goes back to Grace's question about BRICS and its influence. And I think where BRICS is going to become influential and progress and possibly successful is that it doesn't put conditions for you to be able to trade with these BRICS countries. What US does is says, if you want to use the dollar, if you want to use the SWIFT, send money to Iran or Russia, Russia and Iran political establishment has to play ball with whatever policy at whatever time we want it to be. To the extent where you think, okay, so if I'm on their side, then I'll be okay. That's not the case. Germany is on the side of the US. We all know that. After the Second World War, they literally controlled the German political establishment to the point where they said, cut relations with Russia. They cut relations with Russia. I'm not going to take any more gas from them. They're not going to take gas from them. They blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, causing one of the largest one of the largest man-made environmental disasters, and a infrastructure that was supposed to be providing gas from Russia to Germany to maintain German economy, German industry. And there's many Allenists who have said that German industry has regressed because they don't have access to cheap gas anymore. And when they said to America, okay, who's going to supply us with gas now that you've cut the gas between us and Russia? We were getting it at 30%. BMWs were being made, Mercedes-Benz were being made, factories, people, jobs. We need gas, otherwise our economies go down. Are people going to be without work? America's like, we'll supply it to you, LNG. They looked at the price. They said, okay, you're supplying to us 7 times the price that you're charging Americans. So even Germany, who's an adamant, strong ally of the US, part of the NATO, part of, they have bases of the US there and so forth, they got abused by American foreign policy. So it doesn't matter if you're on the side of America or part of the American clique and group, they're still going to take advantage of you when it suits them. So what BRICS, I believe, is going to offer is for us to give loans for you to develop your infrastructure and all of these things. There is going to be no prerequisite, you have to follow our foreign policy. As long as obviously we're not fighting with each other, you don't have to have the same view that, say, China has about, America, Saudi Arabia has to have. No, it's fine. You can have relations with. We're not going to dictate to you foreign policy. We're not going to dictate to you reforms within your country that will be detrimental to you, but beneficial to massive corporations in the US and in Europe, right? So they will not be saying you have to do X, Y, and Z. So that's one of the benefits, and I think that's why so many countries are looking to join. Because now they can say, fine, if we are excluded from the dollar system and we can trade with other countries that are growing, and I think their economy is bigger than the G7, and their population is definitely bigger than the G7, and their economies are only growing, not like other economies that are going down. India and Brazil and Russia and China, these are economies that are going up, constantly increasing. They're going to overtake the G7 economies, even individually. They're saying we can work together without us interfering in your politics. And so if Saudi Arabia is like, fine, okay, like you asked, Saudi Arabia is saying, okay, you can't guarantee my security. Well, maybe that's time for Saudi Arabia to realize, is the power structure that the kings have relied on force and outside strength, or is it from the will of my people? Am I a good king? Am I a good regime? Am I a good government that my people will support me? If you go to Oman, it's the opposite. The people support the Sultan of Oman because he provides for his people. He has provided infrastructure where people are living and thriving, education, healthcare, so forth. And they're allowed to express themselves. People from different sects live together. But then you go across the border into Saudi, some people will support the king because it's, the monarchy system that they have because it's beneficial. But I'm pretty sure there's a large population, especially Shias and 6 million Shias in the East, who are being oppressed, who are not allowed to express their religious views and have full access to the resources of the country, who were like, well, we're not really happy with this government. Will they, revolt and revolution? No, not necessarily. But that's, and also I think the fear of the Saudis isn't from a revolution necessarily, but an internal revolt. So another prince comes and takes the position of this prince. Why? Because that's the system that you guys have set up. You haven't set up a system where someone's elected, does his 4 years term, could be either elected again, does another 4 years, and then that's it, another person comes in. You are a king that you came into power by tricking your other cousins, removing your uncle, right? Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia did that. His uncle was next in line. He removed him, put himself in line. So he's scared someone else is going to do that. But if he said, if the US is saying no, if anyone else comes, we'll basically tell them if they come, they can't stay, we'll get rid of them. It has to be you. No one else is going to come. But so you're relying as a Saudi sovereign king on the US. And that's the problem that Iran had. Our king relied on America keeping him into power. If he didn't have that relationship, he would not necessarily follow the dictates of a foreign country, but say, what is the best for my country, I will do, right? And that's the problem when someone else maintains your power from outside. You're subservient to make them happy. They're like, you can do whatever you want in your country, whatever oppression you want to have, no problem. Even though United States, promotes human rights and democracy, but you can do whatever you want. There's no democracy in Saudi, but you're a strong ally. You can do whatever you want. Human rights abuses, that's fine. You're a strong ally. But foreign policy, whatever we say, they're like, fine, no problem. We'll follow whatever foreign policy you have. Internally, you're allowed to do whatever you want. What kind of a power imbalance is this? This is a country that has its own king. Why is it acting like this towards another country being influenced? It's because it's not built on the will of the people and the support of the people. Now, how that will play out in BRICS, we don't know. Maybe that's why Saudi Arabia is like, oh, let's see what happens. Can you guys guarantee us staying into power? I don't know. I don't think anyone from BRICS can give that guarantee because that's not how BRICS works. BRICS is, I was listening today, is one country, one vote. It's not like China has 1.4 billion, so it has 5 votes, and Iran is only 90 million, so it has 1 vote. No, it's like every single country that joins, and then we try to make collective decisions. It's every country, 1 vote. And we're not going to guarantee anyone's internal security. That's to do with your country, So I think it's very important that whoever goes into BRICS, they all know this. And so it will come to a point where we'll see in the future, very close future, and we can start seeing it now, that the dollar is becoming weaker because it's being used less as an international form of payment. I heard today that BRICS may introduce a currency, and I saw a picture that President Putin had of the currency, and it looked very nice. And I think maybe not necessarily the dollar will completely evaporate, but maybe it will be the dollar there. And then you have the euro at the moment, which is like 24% of trading. And you may have the BRICS, maybe like 20-25%. If you don't want to use those two, you have an alternative. And that's what the BRICS is. And when I was listening to, I believe, Prime Minister Modi from India, and I think even China, they said we haven't come here to replace the major infrastructures that exist, World Bank. We've come to provide an alternative. People can choose what they want. If the Europeans or other countries are happy to continue using the infrastructure that was set up by the West, that's fine. They can continue using SWIFT or whatever. But an alternative needs to be there because there's so many people that are sanctioned, so many people that are cut from this way of trading that they are fed up. They had enough. They're like, we want to be able to trade with each other. I want to be able to, buy stuff from Kenya. I can't do it because I can't use SWIFT. So we need an alternative. It's not, as they say, need is the mother of invention. There's a need for Iran and Tanzania and China, all these countries to trade with each other. They can't have Iran and China specific direct banking alone and one for, it will be too much. So what they do is they will set up a system that countries can join like SWIFT, but it will be something else. People join, and then whoever's joined that group of transaction payment, they can use and they can do trade with each other using their own currencies.
Which is great, really, because it's all about providing options. And then when you mentioned earlier about, the U.S. not protecting its own citizen, look what they've done with sanctioning RT employees, and they are U.S. citizens working for RT. So then they didn't care about that. And I wanted to hear your thoughts also, since, we're talking about BRICS. Well, what's your thought on what's happening in the global south? Because it seems like from what I've been reading and hearing that a lot of, most of the countries applying to be part of BRICS are coming from African continent. And that says about it. And as I am aware that there's a lot of Islamic tradition also in Africa. So what's happening in West Asia couldn't be separated from what's happening in the global South. But isn't that exciting that there's those things happening in the global South?
Did you want to add anything, Roy, before I answer that?
Well, I mean, I've always found it interesting how the way like Africa was decimated. But the strange thing is like China and Russia, they're building the infrastructure, but China's like owning all the ports and everything, as well as in a lot of Europe. People aren't aware of that. And it's kind of, what's the real control mechanism? Like, I mean, my own thought, it's very hard to see, because we hear stories of how each country is actually run and who, like, everyone is kind of decimating. Like the Chinese, it's like everything's controlled. You've a system that it's controlling, that you can travel, you can do everything. And in Russia, everyone is saying how bad things are. But when you talk to the locals, it's a totally different story. So it's like you, like, I mean, I'm learning a lot of stuff today with Iran, and it's fantastic to hear. And that's what I love to do. I love to hear both sides of the story. But it's like, sometimes people think everything is controlled at the top and they're all just doing part of their thing to make it look like there's one side and the other. But it doesn't look like it's like that. It looks like there's definitely genuine a few countries that are there for the people trying to make change in the world. And like, I mean, I'm Irish, and I know you're in the UK. We know that the government's there. They're not for the people. There's not even opposition in Ireland. Like, the whole lot of them are actually decimating the country. So most people think that everywhere is like that, but it's not like that.
So, two good points that you raised, and I'll try to join them together. This idea that we're discussing that BRICS will be a useful alternative doesn't mean I support everything of either, or I believe that every policy, foreign policy that China, Russia, Iran has is necessarily the best policy. What we're saying is that there needs to be an alternative to the current world system that is not benefiting the world. This current world system isn't enabling the continent of Africa, which is the richest continent, like in mineral wealth, to grow. Why are African nations and citizens of different countries like Nigeria and stuff, why are they not benefiting from so many resources that they have, right? So the whole point of BRICS is to enable that process. And yes, you're right. China will probably come into a country and say, look, we're happy to, you want us to build your roads and your ports? We can do that. It will cost this much. You want to pay us? No? Okay, fine. Then you give us, access to this, access to that, we'll build it. The Europeans didn't even offer that. They just said, we're going to take this. And then they will take it and go. The Chinese are at least saying, well, it's going to cost to do that. If you want, we'll do it. But if you want, and the country's like, fine, okay, do it. The Europeans don't even like that for the Africans. They're like, no, keep our system where most of France's uranium came from West Africa. And West Africa, the nation, I think it was Niger, is a poor country. All the gold bullions that are stored in the reserve of France, none of it came from France. It came from West African countries, but those Western African countries are poor. They're not benefiting from their resources. They're not even getting infrastructure installed so they can benefit themselves. So this idea of each country, I am sure African countries and their leaders are smart people. If they have an alternative of what the West is offering, which is, let us take your resources for a small percentage, and another group of saying, look, we'll come and build this, it's going to cost that much, give us access to this for a while, or that resource. They can make their own choice of what they want. It's up to them, right? Western European and America doesn't need to decide for Africa. That's one. Two, I think there's loads of Asian countries that, and some Latin American countries that also are applying or want to apply to join BRICS. So definitely African, Asian, and Latin America and South America. Because I believe that a lot of people are fed up, as I said, with the old order that was set up by the US and the British, those empires from 60, 70 years ago, bygone era that's not benefiting the people. So I think that we have to be critical of all of the institutions that have been and the ones that are coming. And that's, I think, the benefit of what at the stage that we are now is this time if someone comes and is trying to take advantage and build a new system that we think, oh, great, the old system, we've got a new one, it's going to be better than the old one. No, we can critique it because we have something to base it against. And if we realize, like Roy said, that, you know, China is coming in and people are arguing, well, China comes in and takes over X, Y, and Z of a country, fine. Then maybe we can enable that country to have better negotiation process, or so forth and so on. Whatever it has to be for them to benefit fully from the exchange of from the exchange with the other countries. It could be Russia, it could be any other country. But I think that the fact that we don't do anything and we allow a monopoly of the US and Western Europe, and it's not even the whole of Europe. You don't see Poland going into various African countries or Asian countries and taking its resources. You don't see Slovakia doing this. You don't see, Estonia or Hungary doing this. It's really specifically England, France, Germany. I don't even know if Spain is still doing that. They were colonizers at the beginning, but it's mainly 3 or 4 or 5 Western European countries and America and Canada that is benefiting from the process of continuous colonization and the continuous world order that they keep mentioning to continue. And I don't think that is beneficial for Global South. And so Global South is looking to say, okay, what other systems and platforms and organizations are there that we can join that will give us alternative? And through that alternative, they can grow and possibly other alternative platforms can be created. Because I think once there's a balance of power, and Ayatollah Khamenei has mentioned this, that the shift of power is going from the West to the East. And when we say power, I think he incorporates economy, development, technology, all of these things. So that the power is shifting, people can then decide, what do we want to take? Do we want to use technology from the East that maybe has less strings attached? Or do we want to work with the West that may have more strings attached? And to be honest, if the global North, if the US and Western Europe promotes the idea of capitalism, that's the whole concept of capitalism, is competition, isn't it? It's saying to your consumer and your customer, look, here's the various options you can have. Which one do you want? As opposed to no, monopoly, communism, where here's one option, you're going to have to take that one. So Western countries have to decide, do they believe in a free market capitalistic system, or is it no, whatever they decide, a dictatorial kind of system?
Thank you very much, Reza. My last comment is that I find BRICS very inclusive and open, and they're not, from what you and I have read and listened to, they're not really trying to kill America, that America doesn't exist, or other countries, but just to really shift that, and it's happening, as you said. So, okay. Any more last words? And our special guest host, something happened in the family. Kevin, right now we pray for his mother. She's in the hospital, and of course, whether in other countries, like in my city, my sister has no power. So then the same thing as our guest host in Serbia. There was a storm, no power, no internet. But we continue, okay? And so that's what we do. Even if there's some censorship, there's Wi-Fi issue, we continue. Sometimes I'm out, Roy continues with a guest, and then there was a time only our guest was not in and continued. So thank you. But if you have any more last thoughts, Roy as well, go ahead and we can wrap it up.
I'll just say that I appreciate your efforts, and we'll pray for Kevin. I hope his mother gets better, and we hope that your guests in Serbia and other places, that their power is put back up. And that's the thing. These are examples of the world is made up of people, of humans, right? And I think politicians, and when you said to me the question you said previously, why do politicians stand up and cheer for someone who's drenched in the blood of innocent Palestinians and Lebanese and other people? is because they've disconnected themselves from humanity. You know, Sa'di, a famous Iranian poet, he said, I paraphrase, he has a beautiful poem where he said that the humans are made of one as a whole. If any part of a human, as in another human, is hurt, the other part of the human will know. So if you, somewhere around the world, is hurt, and I do not feel your pain, I don't empathize and sympathize for you, I'm not part of the human race. And so I hope that BRICS and other organizations are trying to bring humanity together, so that we, in the short space of time, if you think about it, we're a speck on a planet. Each individual human being is a speck on a planet, and that planet is a speck in the galaxy, and that galaxy is a speck in the universe that exists. We're tiny in the creation. You could be religious and say God, or if you're not religious, but this creation, this thing that has been created, this universe, we're a tiny speck. And look what we're doing to each other on this tiny little planet that has enough abundance resources to make us have like paradise on earth. If we just didn't steal and hurt and oppress each other, there's enough to go around. So I hope that whoever watches this, outside of politics or inclusive of politics, realizes that whatever politics they follow should be the politics of humanity that brings humans together. If you follow the politics that brings humans together, that's good politics. If it's politics that's driving humans away from each other, causing conflict, instigating conflict, and promoting conflict, that's not the kind of politics I would like to be involved in.
That's a great ending. It reminded me of the recent interview of Alexander Dugin and a conversation with Pepe Escobar, when he said, when you think about economics and politics, it's not separate from humanity. It's a myth that it is separate. So let us remember that, yeah, we're all humans, but there's so much for us to be connected with. Thank you again, and thank you for sharing your invaluable insight. Dr. Reza John Vedadi, and follow him on Instagram and in LinkedIn. And Roy, as always, thank you, my dear forever co-host, Roy of the Awakening podcast. And yes, to all those who have you have no power, or you're flooded, or whatever is happening for this so-called climate change or climate issues, be well and stay safe, and reach out to me if you are in need of any quantum resonance supplements. So I will be your guide. And this is Dr. Grace Asagra of Quantum Nurse Podcast. Take care. And share, don't forget. Share. Okay. Take care.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you can find my 6 podcasts on roycollin.com, or scan the QR code if you're looking to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, help with that. Also, if you're looking for a virtual assistant, we also have that service. And you can help the show by visiting the store, supporting our sponsors, or making a donation. Until next week, take care.